Good evening. Welcome to this sanctuary of peace and timeless wisdom, where the noise of the world fades into the background and only the essential remains. Before we embark on the journey to the high mountains alongside our protagonist Kalen, please take a brief moment to ground yourself in this global community by writing in the comments below exactly which country you are listening from and what time it is there right now. This simple act of sharing your location and time serves as a digital anchor connecting us all in a shared space of intention and mindfulness, creating a vast web of consciousness that spans the entire globe. Now allow your body to settle into a position of absolute comfort, letting the tension drain from your muscles like water flowing downstream. To ensure that you can always find your way back to this temple of relaxation and continue receiving these stories of deep rest, we invite you to subscribe to the channel right now. By clicking that button, you are making a commitment to your own well-being and ensuring that the path to tranquility remains open and accessible whenever you need to escape the chaos of daily life. Let us now leave the heavy baggage of the day behind and step onto the path of the story, the steep ascent to the silent peak. The mist clung to the jagged rocks of the mountain path like a heavy grey shroud obscuring the world below and creating a sense of isolation that was both terrifying and holy. Kalen pushed his body upward against the steep incline, feeling the burn in his calves and the sharp intake of cold air in his lungs with every labored breath. Every step was a battle against gravity and his own desperate desire to arrive somewhere other than where he was at this exact moment. He did not look at the twisted roots of the ancient pines or the delicate moss that carpeted the stones because his eyes were fixed solely on the invisible summit hidden somewhere in the clouds. This was a man consumed by the fire of impatience, a traveler who believed that peace was a destination to be conquered rather than a state of being to be uncovered. The mountain remained indifferent to his struggle, standing vast and silent in its eternal witnessing of all things that pass. The sound of his own boots crunching against the loose gravel seemed deafening in the profound silence of the high-altitude wilderness. Kalen adjusted the heavy pack on his shoulders, a physical manifestation of the mental burdens he carried, known in the ancient texts as dukkha, or suffering. He carried the weight of past failures and the heavy anxiety of future expectations, all of which prevented him from experiencing the lightness of the present moment. The wind howled through the crevices of the rock face, carrying with it the scent of wet stone and pine needles, a sensory reminder of the raw and unpolished nature of reality. Yet Kalen barely noticed the aroma or the sound, as his mind was already projecting itself into a fantasy of the monastery, where he believed all his problems would instantly dissolve. As the path grew narrower and steeper, the air became thinner, forcing Kalen to slow his frantic pace, despite his resistance to slowing down. This forced deceleration was the first lesson of the mountain, although his mind was too clouded by target fixation to recognize it as such. He stumbled over a protruding root and nearly fell, catching himself on the rough bark of a cedar tree that had stood in that spot for 300 years. The texture of the bark was coarse and damp against his palm, a tactile shock that brought him back to his body for a fleeting second. He cursed under his breath, a verbal expression of the internal friction between his ego, which wanted to control the timeline, and the reality of the mountain, which operated on geological time. Finally, through a break in the shifting fog, the outline of the monastery of the silent peak emerged like a phantom structure suspended in the sky. It was built from dark timber and grey stone seamlessly integrated into the cliffside, as if it had grown there organically over thousands of years. The sight of the destination triggered a fresh wave of adrenaline in Kalen, causing him to rush the final 100 meters with a reckless lack of mindfulness. He ignored the burning in his chest and the trembling in his legs, driven by a thirst called tanha, or craving, which convinced him that relief was just behind those wooden gates. He did not see the beauty of the architecture or the harmony of the setting, only the end of his physical exertion. Kalen arrived at the massive wooden gates, gasping for air, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird seeking freedom. The wood of the gate was weathered and aged, marked by the seasons and the passage of countless storms, yet it stood solid and imposing. There was no doorbell and no knocker, just the sheer vertical expanse of timber that separated the profane world from the sacred space within. He stood there for a moment, wiping the sweat from his brow and expecting the doors to open automatically for him, as if the universe revolved around his arrival. When nothing happened, he felt a surge of irritation rising in his gut, a familiar heat that he had carried with him from the city below. He raised a fist and pounded on the wood 3 times, the sound echoing hollowly into the mist that swirled around him. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute, amplifying the noise of his own agitated breathing. He waited for what felt like an eternity, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, unable to stand still in the presence of such stillness. His mind began to race with judgments and complaints, wondering why no one was attending to him and questioning the efficiency of this place. This inability to simply wait without judgment was the core of his affliction, a rejection of the present moment in favor of a preferred future. Minutes dragged on like hours, and the cold mountain air began to seep through his layers of clothing, chilling the sweat on his skin. Kalen knocked again, this time harder, and with more frustration, letting his knuckles bruise against the unforgiving wood. He shouted a greeting that was swallowed instantly by the vastness of the valley behind him. He felt small and insignificant, a feeling that his ego desperately tried to fight by making more noise. He was unaware that on the other side of the gate, there was a consciousness observing his turmoil, not with judgment, but with a deep and penetrating awareness. The delay was not an accident, but the beginning of the teaching. Suddenly, without the sound of a latch or a creak, the great doors swung inward, revealing a courtyard of pristine, raked gravel. Standing in the center of the opening was Master Hoshin, a figure of slight build but immense presence, wrapped in simple robes the color of autumn leaves. The master did not speak immediately, nor did he bow or smile in the conventional way. He simply stood there, with a posture of perfect alignment, his eyes clear and reflective like a mountain pool. Master Hoshin looked at Kalen not as a stranger, but as one observes a passing storm cloud, knowing its nature is transient. The silence of the master was louder than any words Kalen could have spoken. Kalen opened his mouth to explain his journey, to list his credentials, and to demand entry, but the words died in his throat. The atmosphere radiating from Master Hoshin was one of such profound equanimity that it rendered Kalen's frantic energy obsolete and embarrassing. The master gestured with a single fluid motion of his hand, inviting the traveler to step across the threshold. As Kalen stepped over the raised wooden beam at the base of the gate, he felt a shift in the air pressure, as if he were entering a vacuum where the laws of the hurried world no longer applied. He was inside now, but he was far from home. The heavy doors closed behind him with a soft thud, sealing out the wind and the view of the valley below. Kalen dropped his heavy bag onto the gravel, the sound sharp and intrusive in the quiet courtyard. He looked at Master Hoshin, expecting a welcome speech or an orientation, but the master simply turned and began to walk slowly toward the main hall. The pace was agonizingly slow, each step deliberate, and fully formed a walking meditation that honored the earth beneath the feet. Kalen, accustomed to rushing, felt a twitch of impatience in his legs, but he had no choice but to follow. The lesson had begun, and the subject was the excruciating art of slowing down, the weight of heavy baggage. Kalen followed Master Hoshin down a long wooden corridor, that seemed to stretch endlessly into the dim interior of the monastery. The floorboards were polished to a high sheen by centuries of socks and bare feet, reflecting the soft light of the paper lanterns that hung at regular intervals along the ceiling. The air here smelled of old cedar and the faint lingering aroma of sandalwood incense, a scent that immediately triggered a physiological response of slowing down in anyone who breathed it. However, Kalen was still vibrating with the frenetic energy of his ascent and the chaos of the world he had left behind. His heavy boots sounded clumsy and loud against the delicate wood, creating a sharp contrast with the silent gliding steps of the master ahead of him. Every creak of the floor seemed to announce his lack of grace and his utter lack of mindfulness to the entire building. Master Hoshin stopped in front of a sliding door made of rice paper and wood, a barrier so fragile that a careless hand could punch right through it. The master slid the door open with a gentle fluid motion that produced no sound whatsoever, revealing a small square room that was shocking in its emptiness. There was no bed and no chair and no desk, only a simple straw tatami mat on the floor and a single folded cushion for sleeping. The concept of sunyata, or emptiness, was physically manifest in this space, challenging the Western mind that equates comfort with the accumulation of objects. Kalen stared into the room, feeling a sudden spike of anxiety at the lack of distraction available to him in such a barren environment. The master gestured for Kalen to enter and placed a small pitcher of water and a ceramic bowl near the entrance. Master Hoshin spoke softly, saying, "Here you will find what you brought with you." He did not mean the physical luggage, but rather the turbulent contents of Kalen's own mind, which would soon become deafeningly loud in this silence. With a slight bow that was more of a nod, the master closed the door, leaving Kalen alone in the semi-darkness. The silence of the room was not merely an absence of noise, but a heavy physical presence that pressed against his eardrums. It was the kind of silence that forces a person to confront the noise of their own internal dialogue without any place to hide. Kalen dropped his large backpack onto the tatami mat, and the sound was a dull thud that seemed to violate the sanctity of the space. He began to unpack with a nervous energy, pulling out items that he suddenly realized were completely unnecessary in this environment. He pulled out thick books on complex philosophy and multiple changes of stylish clothing, and a digital watch that was still synced to the time zone of the busy city he had fled. Each object he removed from the bag was a tether to his identity, a piece of the ego he was trying to protect. He arranged them around him like a fortress, trying to fill the emptiness of the room with familiar things to make the unknown feel safer. He picked up the digital watch and stared at the numbers changing second by second, a relentless march of time that dictated his entire life until this moment. The red digits seemed aggressive in the soft, natural light of the mountain evening, reminding him of schedules and deadlines and the constant pressure to be productive. He felt a strong urge to check for a signal on his device to see if anyone had missed him, or if the world had collapsed in his absence. This urge was the manifestation of tanha, or craving the sticky attachment to the sensory world that keeps the mind trapped in the cycle of samsara. He resisted the urge to turn it on, but the mere presence of the device was a distraction. Sitting in the middle of his scattered possessions, Kalen realized that he was exhausted to his very bones, yet his mind was racing like a wild horse. This was the state of the modern mind, tired but wired, unable to find the off switch, even when presented with perfect conditions for rest. He tried to sit on the cushion and close his eyes, but his thoughts immediately began to replay the journey up the mountain and rehearse imaginary conversations with the master. He wondered how long he would have to stay here and what the training would entail, and if he was even capable of enduring such boredom. The monkey mind swung from branch to branch, agitated and loud, filling the quiet room with invisible noise. The light outside the paper screen began to fade, shifting from the grey of the mist to the deep blue of twilight. The temperature in the room dropped rapidly, and Kalen shivered, pulling a wool sweater from his pile of belongings. He realized he was hungry, but he did not know when or if he would be fed. This uncertainty triggered a primal fear, a subtle form of dukkha related to survival and control. He was used to satisfying every desire the moment it arose, with the click of a button or a short walk to a store. Here he was, at the mercy of a rhythm he did not understand and could not control, forcing him to sit with the discomfort of wanting. He stood up and paced the small room, measuring the space with his restless steps, 3 paces one way and 3 paces back. The texture of the straw mat was rough against his socks, a grounding sensation that he tried to ignore in his agitation. He felt like a caged animal looking for an escape route, even though the door was unlocked and he was free to leave. The prison was not the room, but his own inability to be at peace with himself for even 10 minutes. He went to the paper window and slid it open a few inches, peering out into the darkening courtyard. Outside, the mist had cleared slightly, revealing the silhouette of a twisted pine tree against the night sky. The tree stood perfectly still, moving only slightly when the wind passed through its needles, accepting the cold and the dark without resistance. It was a living example of equanimity, existing in harmony with the environment, rather than fighting against it. Kalen looked at the tree and felt a pang of envy for its simplicity. He wanted that stillness, but he wanted to grab it and possess it, rather than become it. He closed the window, shutting out the cold air, and sat back down on the cushion, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, the deep resonance of a large bronze bell echoed through the complex, vibrating in the wooden floor and in Kalen's chest. It was not a jarring sound, but a low hum that seemed to originate from the earth itself, signaling the end of the day, or perhaps the beginning of a practice. The sound bypassed his intellectual mind and spoke directly to his nervous system, commanding a moment of involuntary pause. Kalen took a deep breath, his first conscious breath since arriving, and looked at the closed door. The journey of unlearning was about to begin, and the weight of his baggage was heavier than he had ever realized. The Garden of Still Stones. The morning light broke over the mountain peaks with a crisp clarity that was almost blinding, illuminating the frost that had settled on the wooden railings during the night. Kalen stepped out of his room, feeling stiff and disoriented, his body aching from the thin mattress and the cold air. He wandered toward the center of the compound, drawn by the rhythmic sound of a rake dragging through gravel. The air was incredibly pure and thin, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine resin, filling his lungs with a vitality that was both shocking and revitalizing. He found himself standing at the edge of a large rectangular courtyard, enclosed by low walls and filled with grey gravel and 15 large stones. This was the Karesansui, or dry landscape garden, a place where nature was reduced to its absolute essence of stone and sand. In the middle of the expanse, Master Hoshin was moving with slow, deliberate grace, pulling a heavy wooden rake through the gravel to create perfect concentric ripples around the rocks. The sound was hypnotic, a repetitive shh that seemed to synchronize with the rhythm of breathing. The master did not look up as Kalen approached, remaining completely absorbed in the simple action of raking, as if the entire universe depended on the placement of each pebble. Kalen watched with a mixture of fascination and impatience, waiting for the master to acknowledge him. After what felt like a long, awkward silence, Master Hoshin completed the pattern and set the rake aside, leaning it against the weathered wall. He turned to Kalen and bowed slightly, his face serene and unreadable. Kalen immediately began to ask questions, saying, "Master, I am ready to learn the great philosophies and the techniques of meditation. So where do we begin? He was eager to fill his notebook with wisdom, to acquire knowledge as one acquires trophies. Master Hoshin smiled a small, compassionate smile that suggested he had heard this request 1,000 times before. The master pointed a finger not at the library or the meditation hall, but at a flat cushion placed on the wooden veranda overlooking the rocks. Master Hoshin said, "Your first lesson is the lesson of the stone. You will sit here and observe the garden until you understand the nature of that large rock in the center." Kalen looked at the rock, which was just a jagged piece of granite with a patch of moss on one side. He felt a surge of disappointment and disbelief rising in his chest. He asked, "Is that it? Do I just look at a rock?" The master nodded slowly and replied, "Do not just look, but see. Watch it until the separation between you and the stone dissolves." Then the master turned and walked away, leaving Kalen alone with the gravel and the silence. Kalen sat down on the cushion, crossing his legs, in what he thought was a proper meditation posture. For the first 5 minutes, he felt noble and spiritual, imagining himself as a dedicated seeker of truth. He stared at the rock, trying to force some profound insight to appear, trying to squeeze wisdom out of the granite with the sheer force of his will. He analyzed the shape and the color and the texture using his intellect to dissect the object. But the rock remained stubbornly silent, offering no secrets and no verbal teachings. It just sat there existing without effort or agenda, completely indifferent to his scrutiny. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the novelty of the exercise began to wear off rapidly, and the physical reality of sitting set in. Kalen's back began to ache, and his legs started to go numb from the restricted blood flow. He shifted his weight constantly, trying to find a comfortable position, but every movement only seemed to highlight his discomfort. The boredom arrived like a thick fog, suffocating his enthusiasm and making him question the validity of this training. He thought, "This is a waste of time. I should be reading sutras or learning breathing techniques, not staring at a pile of rocks." The doubt was a poison known as vicikiccha, hindering his ability to trust the process. He watched a small ant crawl across the surface of the gravel, navigating the ridges and valleys created by the master's rake. The ant moved with purpose, totally focused on its immediate environment, unaware of the human observer looming above. Kalen found himself jealous of the ant's simplicity and its lack of existential angst. His mind began to wander to the past, remembering meals he had eaten, and movies he had watched, and arguments he had won. He was physically present in the garden, but mentally he was thousands of miles away, lost in the illusion of memory and fantasy. Hours passed, and the shadows of the rocks began to lengthen and shift, moving across the white gravel like the hands of a slow geological clock. This was a lesson in impermanence, or anicca, showing that even the most solid and stationary objects are subject to the influence of time and light. Kalen noticed that the rock looked different in the afternoon light than it had in the morning, appearing softer and more textured. For a brief second, he actually saw the rock without labeling it, but the moment was fleeting and quickly covered over by another wave of boredom and irritation. He groaned audibly, hoping someone would hear his suffering. Suddenly, Master Hoshin appeared silently by his side, holding a tray with a cup of tea. The master did not ask if Kalen had learned anything, or if he was enjoying the task. He simply placed the tea on the floor and said, "Drink this, and then continue." Kalen wanted to scream that he had had enough, that he understood the point, and wanted to move on. But the master's presence was so grounding that the protest died in his throat. He picked up the tea and felt the warmth of the ceramic cup against his cold fingers, a sensation of pure reality in a mind filled with abstract complaints. Kalen took a sip of the bitter tea and looked back at the garden with a sigh of resignation. He realized with a sinking feeling that this was not a warm-up exercise, but the main event. The garden was a mirror reflecting his own restless mind back at him, and he did not like what he saw. He was at war with the present moment, fighting against the simplicity of just being there. Master Hoshin walked away again, his footsteps crunching softly on the path, leaving Kalen to face the stone and the setting sun for another hour of excruciating stillness. The restless mind and the broom. The dawn broke over the silent peak with a pale and watery light that did little to warm the freezing air trapped within the monastery walls. Kalen woke to the sound of the wooden clappers signaling the start of the day, and his body protested with a symphony of aches from the previous day of sitting. His muscles were stiff, and his mind was thick with the residue of restless dreams, yet the discipline of the environment demanded immediate movement. He rolled off the thin futon and splashed freezing water onto his face from the ceramic basin, shocking his nervous system into a state of alert misery. He dressed quickly in the simple work clothes provided by the temple, feeling the rough cotton against his skin as a constant reminder of the lack of luxury here. He stepped out into the corridor, expecting to be called to the meditation hall for deep instruction on the mysteries of the universe. Instead, he found Master Hoshin waiting for him in the courtyard, holding a crude broom made of bundled twigs attached to a long bamboo handle. The master did not greet him with words of wisdom or a lecture on the nature of reality, but simply extended the handle of the broom toward Kalen. The object was heavy, an unbalanced tool from a bygone era that seemed inefficient compared to modern cleaning equipment. Master Hoshin pointed to the vast expanse of the stone courtyard, which was covered in a scattering of fallen pine needles and autumn leaves. The master said, "This is your practice for today, known as Samu or work meditation. You will clean the courtyard until not a single leaf remains, and you will do it with the same focus as if you were saving all sentient beings." Kalen took the broom, feeling the coarse texture of the bamboo against his palms, and looked at the enormous task ahead of him with a sinking heart. The courtyard was huge, and the wind was constantly blowing more debris down from the overhanging trees, making the job seem like a Sisyphean punishment. He watched as the master turned and walked away, leaving him alone with the wind and the leaves and his own bubbling frustration. He began to sweep aggressively, attacking the ground with the broom in short, angry strokes that sent dust flying into the air. He wanted to finish this menial chore as quickly as possible so he could get to the real spiritual work that he believed was waiting for him. The sound of the twigs scraping against the rough stone was harsh and irregular, reflecting the chaotic state of Kalen's internal world. He swept with his shoulders tense and his breath shallow, his mind racing ahead to the moment of completion rather than resting in the action of sweeping. Clouds of dust rose up around him, choking him and sticking to the sweat on his forehead, a physical manifestation of his agitated karma. He muttered under his breath, cursing the wind every time it undid his work, and cursing the master for wasting his potential on such a lowly task. He was completely lost in the suffering of resistance, fighting against the reality of the present moment with every muscle in his body. After an hour of this frantic activity, Kalen was exhausted, and the courtyard looked barely any cleaner than when he had started. The wind seemed to be mocking him, depositing new leaves exactly where he had just swept, creating a cycle of futility that drove him to the brink of shouting. He stopped and leaned on the broom handle, breathing heavily and wiping the grit from his eyes. He felt a deep sense of injustice rising within him, a belief that he was better than this, and that his time was too valuable to be spent chasing dead leaves. This arrogance was a thick barrier, preventing him from understanding the true nature of Zen training, which is to find the absolute in the ordinary. Master Hoshin appeared silently from the shadows of the walkway, observing the disheveled disciple and the dust cloud that still hung in the air. The master walked over and gently took the broom from Kalen's tight grip, his movements slow and fluid, Hoshin did not scold him, but instead began to sweep, demonstrating the correct technique with a rhythmic and effortless grace. The master moved from his hara or center, using his whole body to guide the broom rather than just his arms. The sound changed from a harsh scratch to a soft and rhythmic swish-swish that sounded like the ocean breathing. Master Hoshin handed the broom back to Kalen and said, "You are sweeping with your ambition, not with the broom. When you sweep the ground, you must also sweep the dust from your mind. If you rush, you only create more dust." Kalen took the broom back, feeling chastened but still confused by the cryptic instruction. He tried to mimic the master's movement, slowing his pace down and trying to synchronize the stroke with his outbreath. It felt awkward and forced at first, like trying to learn a new language with a clumsy tongue. But he forced himself to slow down, realizing that his previous speed had achieved nothing but exhaustion. He began to focus on the sensation of the bamboo in his hands and the visual pattern of the bristles moving across the grey stones. He watched a single maple leaf as he guided it gently toward the pile, treating it not as trash to be removed, but as a guest to be escorted. The wind blew again, scattering some of his pile, but this time, Kalen tried not to react with anger. He simply acknowledged the wind as part of the process, a force of nature that was beyond his control. He returned to the pile and began again, accepting the cyclical nature of the task. As the morning turned into afternoon, a strange shift began to occur in Kalen's perception of time and effort. The repetitive motion of sweeping began to induce a mild trance state, quieting the chatter of his monkey mind, if only for a few seconds at a time. He stopped thinking about the end result and became absorbed in the texture of the stone and the sound of the twigs. He discovered that when he stopped fighting the task, the physical burden seemed to lighten. He was not yet in a state of mushin or no mind, but the friction of his resistance was beginning to wear down. By the time the sun dipped below the temple walls, the courtyard was clean, and Kalen was covered in a fine layer of dust. He looked at the empty space he had created and felt a surprising sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with praise or achievement. He had spent the entire day doing nothing but moving dirt from one place to another, yet he felt more grounded than he had in years. He placed the broom back against the wall with a newfound respect for the object. The lesson of the broom had planted a seed of mindfulness that would take time to germinate, but the soil had been tilled. The lesson of the cold tea. The evening air settled over the monastery, bringing with it a profound stillness that seemed to seep into the very woodwork of the ancient buildings. Kalen sat in the small tea room adjacent to the main hall, his legs folded beneath him on the tatami mats, which smelled of dried straw and earth. Master Hoshin knelt opposite him near a small iron hearth where a cast iron kettle hissed softly over glowing charcoal. The room was sparsely decorated with only a single calligraphy scroll hanging in the alcove which read simply, "Wait." Kalen watched the steam rising from the kettle, his throat dry and parched from the day of dusty labor in the courtyard. Master Hoshin began the tea ceremony with a precision that was agonizing to watch for someone as thirsty and impatient as Kalen. The master wiped the tea scoop with a silk cloth, folding and unfolding the fabric in a complex geometric ritual that seemed to take forever. Every movement was deliberate and fully inhabited, with no wasted energy and no haste. Kalen watched the master's hands, wanting to urge him to hurry up and just pour the water. His thirst was a physical manifestation of tanha, the craving that drives all suffering, and he was entirely consumed by the desire for the liquid. Finally, the master ladled the boiling water into the ceramic bowl, whisking the green matcha powder into a frothy jade-colored foam. The aroma of the tea drifted across the small space, grassy and bitter and fresh, intensifying Kalen's anticipation. Master Hoshin placed the bowl in front of Kalen, turning it twice so that the most beautiful side of the pottery faced the guest. He bowed low, indicating that the tea was served. Kalen did not wait to admire the bowl or to breathe in the scent. He reached out with trembling hands and grabbed the bowl, driven by a desperate need to consume. He brought the bowl to his lips and took a large gulp, ignoring the steam that was clearly rising from the surface. The liquid was scalding hot near boiling temperature, and it burned his tongue and the roof of his mouth instantly. Kalen gasped and nearly dropped the precious antique bowl, his eyes watering with sudden pain. He set the bowl down with a clatter, spilling a few drops of the green liquid onto the pristine mat. He sat there coughing and holding his mouth, feeling like a fool, while the burning sensation throbbed in his head. Master Hoshin did not flinch or scold him, but simply watched with a gaze of infinite patience and mild amusement. He picked up his own bowl and held it in his hands, feeling the warmth radiate through the clay, but he did not drink. He sat there perfectly still, holding the tea and waiting. Kalen watched him confused and in pain, wondering why the master was not drinking. The master said softly, "The tea is like life. If you rush to consume it before it is ready, you will only burn yourself. You must wait for the temperature to meet your capacity to receive it." They sat in silence for 5 minutes, which felt like 5 hours to Kalen. The tea sat there right in front of him, tantalizing and fragrant, but now a source of fear as well as desire. He watched the steam curl upwards into the dim light, twisting and fading into nothingness, a visual lesson in impermanence. He wanted to drink, but he was afraid of the pain, and he was ashamed of his earlier lack of control. He was forced to sit with his thirst to observe it without acting on it. This was the practice of restraint, allowing the gap between impulse and action to widen. Master Hoshin finally raised his bowl to his lips and took a slow, deliberate sip, savoring the taste and the warmth. He nodded to Kalen, indicating that it was now time. Kalen picked up his bowl again, this time with much more caution and respect. He felt the texture of the glaze against his fingertips, rough in places and smooth in others, noticing details he had missed in his first frantic grab. He brought the bowl to his nose and inhaled deeply, letting the steam warm his face without burning it. He took a small sip, and the tea was perfect, hot enough to warm his chest, but cool enough to be swallowed comfortably. The taste was complex, bitter at first, but with a sweet aftertaste that lingered on the palate. He realized that the tea tasted better now than it would have if he had managed to gulp it down earlier. The waiting had not diminished the experience, it had enhanced it by adding the ingredient of anticipation and awareness. He drank the rest of the bowl, slowly matching the rhythm of the master. When he finished, he placed the bowl down and looked at Master Hoshin, who was cleaning the utensils with the same slow care as before. The pain in Kalen's mouth had subsided to a dull throb, a lingering reminder of the price of impatience. He understood that he had tried to devour the moment rather than experience it. The tea ceremony was not about drinking a beverage, it was about harmonizing with the flow of time. He had tried to force the river, and the river had pushed back. As they left the tea room, the moon had risen high above the silent peak, illuminating the courtyard where Kalen had swept earlier. The world seemed cooler and sharper, and Kalen felt a new sensation in his gut. It was not peace exactly, but a recognition of the friction he carried within himself. He walked back to his room with the taste of matcha still on his tongue, walking a little slower than usual, listening to the sound of his own footsteps fading into the night. The lesson of the cold tea settled in his stomach, warm and heavy. Frustration and the fire. The days turned into weeks, and the initial novelty of the monastery began to wear off, leaving behind the raw and abrasive reality of routine. Kalen found himself trapped in a cycle of repetition that felt designed to dismantle his ego piece by piece. Every morning he woke at the same ungodly hour, swept the same courtyard, and sat staring at the same silent rocks. The boredom was a physical weight pressing down on his chest, a heavy blanket of monotony that suffocated his desire for excitement and progress. He began to feel a simmering anger, a hot coal of resentment burning in his gut directed at Master Hoshin, and the seemingly pointless nature of these tasks. He felt like he was stagnating while the world outside continued to spin and evolve without him. One particularly cold afternoon, Kalen was assigned the task of tending the fire in the main hearth of the communal hall. This was a critical job, as the fire provided the only heat for the entire building and heating water for tea and cleaning. He was given a pile of damp wood logs that had been collected from the forest floor after a recent rainstorm. The wood was heavy and smelled of wet earth and rot, promising a difficult time for anyone trying to coax a flame from it. Kalen approached the task with his usual impatience, wanting to create a roaring blaze instantly so he could return to the warmth of his room. He stuffed the firebox full of logs, cramming them in tightly, without leaving space for air to circulate. He struck a match and held it to the kindling, watching the small flame lick at the damp bark. The fire sputtered and died almost immediately, suffocated by the lack of oxygen and the moisture in the wood. Kalen cursed and struck another match this time, using a handful of dry paper to force the issue. The paper flared up brightly, giving him a false sense of success, but as soon as the paper was consumed, the fire died down again, leaving only cold smoke. The smoke billowed out into the room, stinging his eyes and filling his lungs with a harsh, acrid taste. He coughed and waved his hands, trying to clear the air, but the smoke only grew thicker. Frustration boiled over into rage, and Kalen grabbed a heavy iron poker and began to stab at the logs, trying to rearrange them with brute force. He shouted at the inanimate wood, blaming it for being wet, blaming the stove for being old, and blaming the universe for conspiring against him. The noise of the metal clanging against the iron stove echoed through the silent hall, a violent disruption of the sacred atmosphere. He was completely lost in the grip of dosa or aversion, rejecting the reality of the situation and trying to impose his will upon it through aggression. He was trying to bully the fire into existence, just as he tried to bully his own mind into peace. Master Hoshin entered the room quietly, drawn by the noise and the smell of smoke. He saw Kalen red-faced and sweating, hacking at the wood like a madman, while the room filled with grey haze. The master did not shout or intervene physically, but simply stood by the door and opened a window to let the smoke escape. The rush of cold air cleared the visibility slightly, revealing the chaotic mess inside the stove. Master Hoshin walked over and gently took the poker from Kalen's hand, placing it on the stone floor with a deliberate clink. He looked at the choked firebox and then at Kalen with a look of calm assessment. The master knelt down on the stone floor, heedless of the ash and dirt ruining his pristine robes. He began to remove the logs one by one, pulling them out of the cramped space until the firebox was empty again. He selected only 2 small pieces of wood and placed them in a tent shape, leaving plenty of space between them for the air to flow. He explained, "Fire needs space to breathe, just as the mind needs space to think. You have suffocated the flame with your desire for a big result. You must build the structure first and let the fire grow at its own pace." Master Hoshin struck a single match and placed it gently under the small structure he had built. The flame caught the dry edge of the bark and began to climb slowly, fed by the draft of air moving through the empty space. It was a small flame at first, fragile and tentative, but it was steady. The master did not poke it or blow on it aggressively. He simply watched it, protecting it from drafts with his hand until it was established. He added another small stick only when the fire was ready to receive it, respecting the capacity of the flame to consume fuel. Kalen watched in silence, his anger slowly cooling as he observed the master's patience. He realized that his approach to the fire was a metaphor for his approach to his entire life. He always tried to do too much too fast, cramming his days with activity and his mind with information, choking off the very vitality he was trying to cultivate. He saw that emptiness was not a lack of something, but a necessary condition for growth. Without the space between the logs, there could be no fire. Without the space of silence in his mind, there could be no wisdom. They sat together watching the fire grow from a flicker to a steady blaze that began to warm the cold stones of the hearth. The smell of the smoke changed from acrid and choking to the sweet scent of burning pine, a comforting aroma that signaled safety and home. Master Hoshin handed the poker back to Kalen, but this time, Kalen held it loosely, not as a weapon, but as a tool. The master said, "Tend this fire for the rest of the night. Do not let it go out, but do not force it to burn brighter than it needs to. Just maintain the balance." Kalen spent the next 6 hours sitting by the stove, feeding it one log at a time, listening to the crackle and pop of the wood. It was a meditation on maintenance, on the subtle art of keeping something alive without smothering it. He watched the flames dance and shift, constantly changing shape, yet remaining fire, a perfect example of a nicker, or impermanence. By the time the morning bell rang, his face was smeared with soot, but his mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. He had learned that you cannot force warmth, you can only create the conditions for it to arise. Listening to the wind in the pines, the season began to turn, and the sharp bite of autumn deepened into the early freeze of winter. The trees around the monastery began to shed their last leaves, leaving the branches bare and skeletal against the grey sky. Kalen was sent to the meditation hall, not to sit inside, but to sit on the outer veranda known as the Engawa, facing the dense forest that climbed the slope behind the temple. Master Hoshin had given him a new instruction that sounded deceptively simple. Listen to the wind in the pines until you can hear the silence behind the sound. This was a classic koan of listening, a challenge to move beyond auditory processing into deep awareness. Kalen sat on the wooden floor, wrapped in a thick wool blanket against the biting wind. At first, all he could hear was the wind itself, a constant roaring sound like a distant ocean crashing against the shore. It was loud and chaotic, buffeting his ears and making it difficult to concentrate on anything else. The wind whistled through the cracks in the wood and howled around the corners of the building, creating a symphony of turbulence. His mind immediately labeled the sound as noise and distraction, wishing it would stop so he could find some peace. He was still operating under the delusion that peace was the absence of sound. He tried to block out the wind to retreat into a quiet place inside his head, but the sound was pervasive and relentless. It penetrated his thoughts and rattled his nerves, making him feel exposed and vulnerable. He found himself tensing his shoulders against the gusts, bracing himself physically against the invisible force. He thought about the warm interior of the hall just a few meters away and felt a pang of longing for comfort. But he knew the master was watching from somewhere and he did not dare leave his post. He was stuck there with the wind and his own resistance. As the hours passed, Kalen's resistance began to fatigue simply because it took too much energy to maintain. He stopped trying to fight the sound and just let it wash over him. He began to notice that the wind was not a single monolithic noise, but a complex texture of many different sounds. There was the deep bass rumble of the wind hitting the mountain face, the high-pitched hiss of the air moving through the pine needles, and the creaking of the heavy branches rubbing against each other. It was a chaotic orchestra, playing a song that had no beginning and no end. He started to listen to the gaps between the gusts, the brief moments of relative quiet when the wind took a breath. In those microseconds of stillness, the silence of the mountains seemed to rush in, filling the void with a heavy, profound presence. He realized that the silence was not absent during the wind. It was the canvas upon which the wind was painting. The sound arose from silence and returned to silence, just as thoughts arise from consciousness and return to it. This realization was a glimpse of sunyata, the emptiness that holds all form. Kalen closed his eyes and focused his entire being on the auditory sensation, letting go of the visual world completely. He felt the vibration of the wind in his chest and on his skin, blurring the boundary between the observer and the observed. He was no longer a man listening to the wind, he was simply the act of listening itself. The distinction between inside and outside began to dissolve. The wind was not happening to him, it was happening through him. He felt a sudden sense of expansion, as if his consciousness had spread out to include the trees and the wind and the sky. Master Hoshin stepped quietly onto the veranda and sat down next to Kalen, moving so silently that he seemed to materialize out of the air. The master did not speak, but simply joined the listening, adding his own depth of presence to the field. They sat together for a long time, two human figures dwarfed by the scale of the elements. The master's presence acted as a stabilizer, grounding Kalen's experience and preventing him from drifting into fantasy. It was a transmission of silence from mind to mind, without the need for words. Eventually, the wind began to die down as evening approached, leaving a ringing stillness in its wake. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. It was vibrant and alive, charged with the energy of the storm that had passed. Kalen opened his eyes and looked at the pine trees, which stood motionless, now dark silhouettes against the twilight. They had endured the wind without complaint, bending and swaying, but never breaking. They were the embodiment of resilience and flexibility qualities that Kalen was slowly beginning to absorb by osmosis. Master Hoshin broke the silence, speaking in a voice that was barely a whisper. He said, "The wind does not try to blow, and the trees do not try to listen. It is all one happening. When you stop separating yourself from the world, the conflict ceases. Do you hear the silence now?" Kalen nodded slowly, not needing to verbalize his answer. He could hear it not with his ears, but with his whole body. It was a silence that was compatible with noise, a peace that could exist in the middle of a storm. He stood up stiffly, his legs numb, but his mind strangely alert and refreshed. The lesson of the wind had scoured some of the mental debris from his consciousness, leaving him feeling cleaner and lighter. He walked back into the temple carrying the sound of the pines inside him, a secret music that he could return to whenever the noise of his own thoughts became too loud. The mountain was teaching him language without words, and he was finally beginning to understand the grammar of silence. The master's silence. The winter solstice approached, bringing with it the shortest days and the longest, darkest nights of the year. The monastery seemed to turn inward, the heavy wooden shutters closed against the biting cold, and the daily rhythms slowing to a glacial pace. Kalen had been at the silent peak for months now, yet a persistent hunger for intellectual validation still gnawed at him. He wanted feedback, he wanted praise, he wanted to know if he was doing it right, but Master Hoshin had become increasingly silent, speaking only when absolutely necessary, and often answering Kalen's complex questions with a mere gesture or a blank stare. This silence was not a punishment, but a mirror reflecting Kalen's desperate need for external approval back onto himself, forcing him to confront his own insecurity. One morning, after the dawn meditation, Kalen cornered Master Hoshin in the library, a room filled with ancient scrolls that he was forbidden to read. He asked urgently, "Master, I feel I'm changing, but I do not know what it means. Am I close to enlightenment? Is my samadhi deepening? Please tell me where I stand on the path." The words tumbled out of his mouth in a rush of anxiety, a verbal torrent trying to fill the quiet space between them. He needed a report card, a validation of his spiritual ego to assure him that his suffering had a purpose. He was treating the Dharma like a career ladder, looking for the next promotion. Master Hoshin looked at him with eyes that were deep pools of compassion, but devoid of the engagement Kalen sought. The master picked up a calligraphy brush, dipped it into the black ink, and drew a perfect circle on a piece of rice paper. He held it up for Kalen to see, and then without a word crumpled the paper into a ball and tossed it into the wastebasket. He then turned and walked out of the library, leaving Kalen standing alone with his mouth open and his questions hanging in the stale air. The rejection of his intellectual inquiry was total and absolute, leaving him with nothing to hold on to. Kalen felt a surge of indignation and confusion rising like bile in his throat. He felt abandoned and ignored, as if his sincere efforts were being mocked by the very person supposed to guide him. He paced the library floor, his footsteps loud on the wooden boards, his mind replaying the scene over and over again. He analyzed the circle, trying to decode its meaning. Was it a symbol of wholeness? Was the crumpling a sign of impermanence? Or was the master just tired of him? His mind spun in circles, creating complex theories to explain a simple non-verbal act, desperately trying to regain control through understanding. For the next 3 days, Master Hoshin did not speak to Kalen at all. They ate together in silence, worked together in silence, and sat together in silence. It was a noble silence designed to cut off the escape route of social chatter, but to Kalen it felt like a cold shoulder. He felt invisible, a ghost haunting the corridors of the temple. The lack of verbal contact made him feel like he was disappearing, like his identity was dissolving, without the reinforcement of conversation. This was the experience of anatta, or no self. Terrifying to the ego, but essential for liberation. Deprived of conversation, Kalen began to have conversations with himself that were louder and more chaotic than ever. He argued with the master in his head. He defended his progress. He criticized the teaching methods. The internal noise became deafening, a cacophony of voices all clamoring for attention. But because he could not vocalize them, they had nowhere to go, and eventually they began to lose their energy. It was like shouting into a void where no echo returns. Slowly, the futility of the internal argument became apparent. If the master would not engage, the fight could not continue. On the 4th day of silence, Kalen was sitting on the Engawa, watching the snow begin to fall. The flakes were large and soft, drifting down in a mesmerizing slow-motion dance that blanketed the world in white. The silence of the snow was different from the silence of the master. It was a soft, cushioning silence that absorbed all sound and all sharp edges. Kalen watched a single flake land on his sleeve and melt into a tiny drop of water. In that moment, he stopped waiting for the master to speak. He stopped waiting for an answer. He just watched the snow. He realized that the master's silence was not an absence of communication, but the highest form of it. Words are limited containers for truth, often distorting reality rather than revealing it. By refusing to speak, the master was forcing Kalen to look at reality directly without the filter of language. The crumpled paper was not a puzzle to be solved, but a demonstration of letting go. The concept of the circle was perfect, but the attachment to the concept was trash. The teaching was instantaneous and direct, bypassing the intellect entirely. A feeling of profound relief washed over Kalen. He did not need to know where he was on the path, because there was no path and no destination. There was only this moment, this snow, this breath. The need for validation fell away like a heavy coat he no longer needed to wear. He felt lighter and more transparent, as if the silence had finally penetrated his thick skull and entered his heart. He took a deep breath of the cold air and smiled, not at anyone, but just for the sheer sensation of being alive. Master Hoshin walked by later that afternoon, carrying a basket of vegetables. He looked at Kalen sitting peacefully by the railing and paused. He did not say, "Well done," or "I see you understand." He simply nodded a barely perceptible dip of the chin and continued on his way. That tiny gesture was enough. It was a recognition of shared presence, a silent acknowledgement that they were both just two beings witnessing the snow. Kalen bowed to the retreating back of the master, feeling a wave of gratitude for the harsh kindness of the silence, surrendering to the boredom. The snow continued to fall for days, burying the monastery in deep drifts that cut off all access to the outside world. The isolation was now complete and total. There was nowhere to go, nothing to do, and no one to see. The daily routine was stripped down to the absolute basics: eat, sleep, sit, sweep. The sensory deprivation was intense, with the white landscape offering little visual stimulation and the silence muffling all auditory input. Kalen entered a phase of profound boredom that felt like a grey fog, seeping into his brain, dulling his senses, and making time stretch into an agonizing eternity. This was not the restless boredom of the early days where he wanted to do something else. This was a deep existential boredom, a confrontation with the emptiness of existence itself. He would sit for hours, staring at a wall, feeling like his mind was slowly turning to mush. He felt heavy and lethargic, his motivation completely drained. The romantic idea of Zen training had vanished, leaving only the stark reality of endless repetition. He questioned everything. Why am I here? What is the point of this? Is this all there is? The glamour of the spiritual search had been replaced by the dull ache of monotony. One afternoon, he lay on his tatami mat, staring at a water stain on the ceiling that looked vaguely like a map of an unknown country. He had memorized every crack in the plaster, every knot in the wood, every grain in the straw mat. His mind was starving for entertainment, for drama, for anything to chew on. But there was nothing. The monastery offered no escape. He was forced to marinate in his own dullness, to soak in the tepid water of his own uninspired consciousness. It was a form of torture that left no marks, but dissolved the will. He tried to meditate, but his mind was sluggish and foggy, drifting into daydreams and stupor. This was the hindrance of thina middha, or sloth and torpor, a heavy blanket that smothers the light of awareness. He felt like he was wading through molasses, unable to generate any spark of insight or clarity. He felt like a failure, a faker man wasting his life staring at a ceiling. He wanted to scream, but he didn't have the energy. He wanted to leave, but the snow blocked the path. He was trapped in the present moment, and he found it utterly uninteresting. Master Hoshin found him lying there, his eyes glazed over and empty. The master did not tell him to get up or to try harder. He sat down on the floor next to him and said, "You are trying to escape the boredom. You are treating it as an enemy. But boredom is just a layer of the mind protecting you from the raw intensity of reality. If you surrender to the boredom completely, if you go into the very center of it, you will find that it is not empty. It is full." Kalen listened skeptically, but he had no other option. He decided to take the advice not out of faith, but out of desperation. He stopped fighting the feeling of dullness and allowed himself to be completely and utterly bored. He sank into the grayness like a stone sinking into a pond. He let go of the desire for entertainment, the desire for stimulation, the desire for something interesting to happen. He accepted that this was his reality: a stain on the ceiling, a cold room, a silent day. As he surrendered, something strange began to happen. The texture of the boredom began to change. It became less heavy and more transparent. He started to notice the subtle details of the room that he had missed before. The way the light shifted across the plaster, the microscopic dust motes dancing in the air, the faint sound of his own heartbeat. The nothing that was happening began to reveal itself as everything. The lack of stimulation forced his senses to become hypersensitive, tuning into the frequencies that are usually drowned out by the noise of excitement. He realized that boredom was just a label he applied to moments that didn't feed his ego's addiction to drama. When he removed the label, he was left with pure sensation. The act of lying on the floor became a rich experience of gravity and pressure and temperature. The sight of the ceiling became a landscape of texture and form. The silence became a symphony of subtle vibrations. The world hadn't changed, but his relationship to it had shifted from rejection to reception. He sat up slowly, feeling a new kind of clarity. It wasn't the sharp, intellectual clarity of a solved problem, but the soft, diffuse clarity of an open window. He felt spacious and calm, his mind resting in a state of open availability. He walked to the window and looked out at the snow. It was no longer just white stuff blocking his way. It was a miracle of crystallization, a vast field of diamonds reflecting the grey light of the sky. He watched a bird land on a branch, shaking loose a small avalanche of powder, and felt a sudden spike of joy that was sharp and pure. He had passed through the gate of boredom and found the garden of presence on the other side. He understood now that the search for excitement is a flight from the self. To sit with oneself when nothing is happening is the ultimate test of friendship with one's own soul. He returned to his cushion, not with enthusiasm, but with a quiet willingness to simply be there. The boredom was still there, but it no longer had teeth. It was just another weather pattern passing through the vast sky of his mind. The first breath of true presence. The breakthrough with boredom had created a subtle shift in Kalen's internal landscape, clearing a space where something new could finally take root. He sat in the meditation hall known as the Zendo, where the air was always cool and smelled faintly of aged wood and discipline. The morning light filtered through the rice paper screens, creating a soft, diffused glow that seemed to hold the room in a timeless suspension. Kalen adjusted his posture on the round black cushion, called a zafu, feeling the stability of the tripod formed by his knees and buttocks. For the first time, he did not feel the immediate urge to get up or the itching distraction of 1,000 unthought thoughts. He simply settled into the physical reality of his body, feeling the weight of his bones and the gentle pull of gravity anchoring him to the earth. Master Hoshin walked the perimeter of the room, carrying the kosaku, or awakening stick, with a silent, predatory grace. The sound of the master's tabby socks sliding against the wooden floor was the only noise in the room, a rhythmic swish-swish that served as a metronome for the sitters. Kalen closed his eyes not to escape the world, but to turn his attention inward to the sensation of the breath entering and leaving his nostrils. He focused on the triangular area between his upper lip and the tip of his nose, the traditional focal point for anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing. He felt the cool air entering on the inhalation and the slightly warmer air leaving on the exhalation, observing the temperature difference with the precision of a scientist. Suddenly, for a brief moment, the observer disappeared. There was no Kalen watching the breath, there was only breathing happening. The duality of subject and object collapsed into a singular field of sensation. The breath was not something he was doing, it was something that was being done through him by the universe. It was a terrifying and exhilarating sensation of total surrender, where the boundaries of the ego dissolved like salt in water. The chatter of the mind stopped completely, not because he forced it to, but because there was no one left to chatter. The silence was absolute and profound, filled with a vibrant, living presence. In that gap of no mind or mushin, Kalen experienced the texture of reality without the filter of language. He heard the distant caw of a crow, and it was not a sound labeled crow, but a direct vibration of pure energy. He felt the fabric of his robes against his skin, and it was not cloth, but a tactile field of sensation. Everything was vividly alive and interconnected, pulsating with the same rhythm as his breath. The concept of separation was revealed as a persistent illusion, a trick of the mind to maintain control. He was not separate from the hall or the master or the mountain. He was an integral part of the unfolding moment. The moment lasted perhaps only a few seconds before the ego rushed back in, claiming the experience for itself. "I did it," his mind whispered. "I finally meditated." With that thought, the duality returned, and the magic evaporated, leaving him back in the realm of concepts and pride. But the memory of that taste remained a lingering flavor of freedom that he could not unknow. He had glimpsed the moon behind the clouds, even if the clouds had covered it up again. He knew now that the peace he sought was not a destination, but a layer of reality that was always present, just beneath the noise. Master Hoshin stopped behind Kalen, sensing the shift in his energy field. The master did not strike him, but placed a hand gently on Kalen's shoulder, a gesture of confirmation and grounding. The touch was warm and firm, communicating a silent message. "Good, but do not hold on to it. Let it go." Kalen exhaled deeply, releasing the tension of his achievement and returning to the simple mechanics of the breath. He understood that grasping at the experience was just another form of craving or tanha, and that true freedom lay in letting even the spiritual highs pass away. The bell rang to end the session, its resonance hanging in the air for a long time before fading into silence. Kalen bowed to his cushion and then to the room, moving with a new fluidity. His movements were less jerky, less driven by the frantic need to be somewhere else. He walked out of the hall into the bright morning sun, and the world looked sharper, as if a layer of dust had been wiped from his eyes. The colors of the moss on the stones were more vibrant, the blue of the sky more intense. He was seeing with the beginner's mind, or Shoshin fresh and unburdened by past conditioning. He walked to the water basin to wash his hands, feeling the icy water against his skin as a blessing rather than a shock. He watched the water swirl down the drain, observing the vortex with fascination. Every mundane act now held the potential for awakening if approached with this quality of attention. He realized that the practice was not just about sitting on a cushion, but about bringing that quality of presence into every moment of the day. The way he walked, the way he ate, the way he washed his hands, it was all the same practice. Later that day, he found himself sweeping the courtyard again, but this time there was no resentment. He swept with the same focus he had applied to his breath, treating each stroke of the broom as a complete event. The wind blew leaves back onto the clean stones, and he simply swept them again without a sigh of frustration. He was no longer trying to finish the job he was just sweeping. The action had become the purpose. He was learning the art of wu-wei, or effortless action, moving with the flow of nature rather than against it. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the gravel, Kalen paused and leaned on his broom, looking up at the first stars appearing in the twilight. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the struggle, for the boredom, for the pain in his legs. It had all been necessary fuel for the fire of awareness. He was not yet a master. He was still a beginner, but he had taken his first true breath of presence. And that one breath was enough to change the direction of his entire life. The slow rhythm of winter. Winter at the Silent Peak was not merely a season, it was a master teacher of patience and endurance. The snow piled up in great drifts against the walls of the monastery, sealing the inhabitants inside a white cocoon of silence. The temperature dropped so low that the oil in the lamps thickened and the water in the basins froze solid every night. Kalen adapted to the cold by moving slower, conserving his energy and layering his clothes until he looked like a round bundle of wool. The harsh environment demanded a total recalibration of his internal rhythm, forcing him to sync his biological clock with the slow pulse of the dormant earth. Life became a series of small, deliberate acts of survival. Every morning, Kalen had to break the ice on the water trough to get water for washing and cooking. The sound of the metal ladle cracking the ice sheet, crack, crunch, splash, became the morning bell of his existence. He learned to appreciate the preciousness of liquid water, treating each drop with reverence. He learned to bank the fire at night with precise care, knowing that a mistake could mean waking up to a freezing room. These daily chores were no longer inconveniences, but vital rituals that connected him to the elemental forces of life. The days were short, and the light was precious. Kalen spent the daylight hours doing manual work, repairing the paper screens that had been torn by the wind, or shoveling paths through the snow. The work was repetitive and physically demanding, but it had a meditative quality. The rhythm of the shovel, scoop, lift, throw, became a mantra, quieting the mind through the exhaustion of the body. He learned to find the sweet spot of effort, where he was working hard enough to stay warm, but not so hard that he would sweat and then freeze. It was a physical lesson in the middle way, finding the balance between extremes. In the evenings, when the darkness fell early, the monastery was illuminated only by the soft glow of candles and oil lamps. The shadows were long and deep, creating an atmosphere of mystery and introspection. Kalen and Master Hoshin would sit in the main hall, wrapped in blankets, drinking hot water to stay warm. There was very little conversation. The cold seemed to freeze the need for unnecessary words. They communicated through presence, sharing the warmth of the fire and the silence of the winter night. Kalen began to understand that companionship does not require constant interaction. One evening, as the wind howled outside, rattling the wooden shutters, Master Hoshin spoke softly. He said, "Winter is the time of roots. The tree looks dead above the ground, but below the surface the roots are growing deep, preparing for the spring. Your practice is the same. You may feel like nothing is happening, like you are frozen and stagnant, but deep inside the roots of your awareness are strengthening. Do not judge the winter by the lack of flowers. Trust the work happening in the dark." Kalen took these words to heart. He had often felt discouraged by the lack of visible progress, the absence of fireworks in his meditation. But now he saw the value of the dormant phase. He realized that the constant drive for growth and productivity was a summer mindset, unsustainable in the long run. He needed to allow himself to lie fallow, to rest and recover, to let the nutrients of the Dharma seep into his soil without forcing the sprouts to appear. He began to embrace the slowness, not as a failure, but as a necessary biological phase. He spent hours watching the icicles form on the eaves of the roof, growing longer, drop by drop. He observed how the water surrendered to the cold, changing state from liquid to solid without resistance. He saw how the snow bent the bamboo branches until they touched the ground, but did not break them. When the snow melted, the bamboo would spring back up, resilient and flexible. He saw the wisdom of yielding, of bending with the weight of circumstances, rather than snapping under the pressure of rigidity. The diet during winter was simple and repetitive, consisting mostly of rice-pickled vegetables and dried beans. At first, Kalen had craved the variety and spice of his old life, but slowly his palate adjusted to the subtle flavors of the simple food. He learned to taste the sweetness in the rice, the saltiness of the pickle, the earthiness of the bean. He practiced mindful eating, chewing each mouthful slowly until it became liquid, fully extracting the nourishment from the meager portions. He discovered that satisfaction comes not from the quantity or variety of the food, but from the depth of attention paid to it. Sleep became a profound practice in itself. In the deep silence of the snowy nights, Kalen slept a heavy, dreamless sleep that restored his nervous system. He woke up feeling rested and clear-headed, his mind washed clean by the black waters of unconsciousness. He realized how sleep-deprived he had been in his former life, constantly overstimulated and under-rested. Here in the winter womb of the mountain, he was finally catching up on years of lost rest, allowing his body to heal its accumulated stress. As the weeks turned into months, Kalen noticed a subtle shift in his temperament. The sharp edges of his personality were being rounded off by the constant abrasion of the routine and the silence. He was less reactive, less quick to judge, less prone to sudden bursts of anger or excitement. He was becoming like the winter landscape, still quiet and covered in a blanket of white equanimity. He was learning to wait to endure and to trust the slow turning of the seasons. The winter had entered his bones, and it was teaching him the power of deep latent potential, watching the ice melt. As the grip of winter began to loosen its hold on the silent peak, the first signs of the thaw appeared as subtle whispers of change in the frozen landscape. Kalen sat by the small pond in the inner courtyard, a body of water that had been a solid sheet of grey ice for months. The air was still biting cold, but the sun hung in the sky a little longer each day, its rays carrying a faint warmth that signaled the turning of the great wheel of seasons. Master Hoshin had assigned Kalen a new practice, to simply watch the ice melt. It sounded passive, almost lazy, but Kalen knew by now that the master's instructions were never as simple as they appeared. This was a lesson in observing the microscopic pace of natural transformation. He sat on a small wooden stool, wrapped in his heavy wool cloak, his eyes fixed on the edge of the pond where the ice met the stone rim. At first, nothing seemed to be happening. The ice looked as solid and permanent as the rocks surrounding it. But as he settled into stillness and his breathing slowed, he began to notice the tiniest of movements. A single drop of water formed on the tip of an icicle hanging from a rock, slowly gathering weight until gravity overcame surface tension. Plink. The drop fell, hitting the frozen surface with a tiny crystalline sound that echoed in the silence. It was a minuscule event, but in the quiet of the monastery, it felt significant. Kalen watched for hours as the sun moved across the sky, changing the angle of the light hitting the ice. He saw how the surface of the ice began to sweat, glistening with a thin film of liquid water. He observed the formation of tiny hairline cracks, spreading like a spiderweb across the grey sheet, accompanied by sudden sharp cracking sounds that seemed to come from deep within the pond. These were the sounds of the structure giving way of rigidity, yielding to fluidity. It was a violent yet creative process, the destruction of one form to allow the emergence of another. He realized that his own mind was like that block of ice. For years, he had been frozen in rigid patterns of thinking and reacting, hardened by his anxieties and defenses. The practice of mindfulness was like the spring sun, gentle, persistent, and warm. It didn't smash the ice with a hammer, it simply shone upon it until the ice had no choice but to melt. He understood that he couldn't force his own transformation through willpower alone. He had to apply the gentle, consistent heat of awareness and let the melting happen in its own time. This was the principle of Wu Wei, or non-forcing, applied to internal growth. By midday, a small pool of open water had formed near the center of the pond, dark and reflective amidst the white ice. Kalen watched the reflection of the passing clouds in that small mirror of water. The water was perfectly still, accepting whatever image fell upon it without grasping or rejecting. The ice, by contrast, could reflect nothing. It was opaque and closed off. He saw clearly that a fluid mind is capable of reflecting reality, while a rigid mind can only block it out. He felt a deep longing to be like the water, to be open and responsive to the world, rather than closed and defensive. Master Hoshin joined him briefly, standing silently by the edge of the pond, his hands tucked into his sleeves. He looked at the melting ice, and then at Kalen, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The master said, "The ice does not resist the sun. It does not cling to its form. It surrenders to the warmth and becomes water again. This is the nature of letting go. When you let go of your rigid ideas of who you are, you return to your original nature, which is fluid and vast." Kalen nodded, feeling the truth of the metaphor in his own body. He felt a softening in his chest, a melting of the tension he had carried around his heart. As the afternoon wore on, the sound of dripping water increased, becoming a steady rhythm that filled the courtyard. Drip, drip, drip. It was the music of impermanence, the sound of time flowing. Kalen found himself mesmerized by the process, losing track of hours. He wasn't bored. He was fascinated by the intricate dance of phase change. He saw how the water flowed into the cracks of the ice, accelerating the melting process from within. It was a lesson in how insight works. Once a small crack of awareness opens, the truth flows in and widens the gap until the whole structure of delusion collapses. A small bird, a wagtail with bright feathers, landed on the edge of the open water, bobbing its tail and taking a quick drink. Its presence was a burst of life in the monochrome world, a sign that the dormancy of winter was ending. Kalen smiled, watching the bird with a sense of kinship. He felt like he was waking up from a long hibernation, his senses stretching and yawning. The melting of the pond was mirroring the melting of his own numbness. He was coming back to life, drop by drop. By sunset, the patch of open water had doubled in size. The ice was retreating, defeated, not by force, but by the gentle persistence of the light. Kalen stood up, his legs stiff, but his spirit light. He bowed to the pond, thanking it for the teaching. He understood now that change cannot be rushed, but it is inevitable. If he just kept sitting, just kept watching, just kept applying the warmth of his attention, his own internal ice would eventually melt away completely, leaving only the clear water of his true self. He walked back to his room, listening to the sound of the melting snow dripping from the eaves of the temple roofs. The whole world was dripping, flowing, moving. The static silence of winter was giving way to the fluid music of spring. Kalen felt a sense of hope rising in him, not a frantic hope for a future result, but a quiet confidence in the natural process of unfolding. He was melting, and it felt good. The art of doing nothing. With the arrival of the spring rains, the monastery entered a period of enforced inactivity. The outdoor work was impossible due to the mud and the relentless downpour that turned the world into a grey wash of water and mist. Kalen found himself with long stretches of unstructured time, a situation that would have terrified him just a few months ago. In his old life, doing nothing was equated with laziness or failure. Every minute had to be filled with productivity or entertainment. But here there was no internet, no television, no phone. There was only the rain and the tatami mat. Master Hoshin introduced the concept of shikantaza, or just sitting, won. This was different from the breath counting or the koan study he had done before. This was meditation, without an object, without a goal, without a technique. The instruction was simply, sit. Do not try to achieve enlightenment. Do not try to calm your mind. Do not try to do anything. Just sit and let the universe be as it is. It was the most difficult instruction Kalen had ever received, because it stripped away the last vestige of the ego, the doer. Kalen sat in the hall listening to the rain drumming on the roof, a steady white noise that drowned out the silence. At first, his mind frantically searched for something to hold on to. It wanted a focal point, a mantra, a visualization, anything to give it a sense of purpose. But there was nothing. He was just a body sitting in a room. The boredom rose up again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the heavy, dull boredom of winter. It was a restless, anxious energy, a feeling of groundlessness. He felt like he was falling through space with nothing to grab onto. He watched his thoughts arise like bubbles in a stream. I should be doing something. Is this right? My knee hurts. I wonder what's for dinner. He saw how his mind was a constant generator of commentary, a machine designed to label and judge reality. In Shikantaza, he was told not to engage with these thoughts, but not to push them away either. He had to let them float by like clouds in the sky, acknowledging their presence without inviting them for tea. It was a practice of radical non-interference. Slowly, as the hours passed, the frantic search for a mental anchor began to subside. Kalen realized that he didn't need to do anything to exist. His heart was beating without his command. His lungs were breathing without his instruction. His cells were dividing without his supervision. Life was living him. The idea that he was the manager of his experience was a delusion. He could just resign from the job of being the CEO of Kalen Inc. and let the natural intelligence of the body and mind take over. A deep sense of relaxation began to spread through his body. It wasn't the relaxation of sleep, but the relaxation of release. He dropped the effort of trying to be someone, trying to get somewhere. He felt the tension in his shoulders dissolve, the knot in his stomach untie. He was simply sitting there vibrating with the energy of the moment. He realized that doing nothing was actually a very active state of being. It was the state of pure receptivity, of open awareness. He looked at the wooden floorboards in front of him and saw the grain of the wood with a clarity that was startling. He saw the dust motes dancing in a shaft of light that pierced the gloom. He heard the individual drops of rain hitting the puddles outside. Without the filter of doing, the senses opened up completely. The world rushed in vivid and raw. He was no longer looking at the world, he was the world looking at itself. The separation between subject and object thinned until it was almost transparent. Master Hoshin sat a few meters away, a statue of perfect stillness. His presence was a reminder that this state of non-doing was not a vacuum, but a fullness. The master was not doing meditation, he was embodying it. Kalen felt a wave of gratitude for this man, who asked nothing of him but to be himself. In a world that constantly demanded more, faster, better, the master offered the radical permission to just be. It was the greatest gift Kalen had ever received. The rain stopped in the late afternoon, leaving behind a silence that was fresh and washed clean. A bird began to sing a complex melody that echoed through the wet air. Kalen listened to the song, not trying to identify the bird or analyze the melody, but just letting the sound vibrate in his eardrums. He felt a sense of joy bubbling up from his belly, a joy that had no cause. It wasn't because he had achieved something or won something. It was the joy of existence itself, the sheer pleasure of being conscious. He stood up from the cushion, his legs numb, but his mind vast. He bowed to the empty space where he had sat, acknowledging the sacredness of the nothing he had just done. He walked out onto the veranda and breathed in the smell of wet earth and pine needles. The world looked new, as if it had just been created that very second. He understood now that the art of doing nothing was the art of allowing everything. by stopping the interference of the ego, he allowed the Tao, the flow of life, to move through him unimpeded. He was empty, but he was full. The sprout in the cracks. Spring finally arrived at the silent peak, not with a triumphant fanfare, but with a quiet, insistent pushing of life through the thawing earth. Kalen was walking along the stone path that traced the perimeter of the monastery wall, a path he had walked hundreds of times before. His attention was usually fixed on the horizon or the internal chatter of his mind, but today his gaze was drawn downward to the rough grey stones beneath his feet. There, in a tiny fissure between two massive granite slabs, a single green sprout had pushed its way through. It was a fragile, impossibly delicate thing, a pale green shoot with two tiny leaves unfurling toward the sun. Kalen stopped and crouched down to examine the sprout more closely. It seemed miraculous that something so soft could penetrate something so hard. The stone was ancient, weathered, and unyielding, representing the solidity of the material world. The sprout was young, tender, and ephemeral, representing the life force itself. Yet the sprout had won. It had found the weakness in the armor of the rock and exploited it with the sheer persistence of growth. Kalen felt a sudden surge of protectiveness toward the tiny plant, realizing how precarious its existence was in this harsh mountain environment. Master Hoshin appeared beside him, his shadow falling over the small patch of green. The master leaned on his staff and looked down, his face crinkling into a smile of genuine delight. He said, "This is the power of softness overcoming hardness. The stone is strong, but it is rigid. The plant is weak, but it is flexible and persistent. In the end, life always finds a way through the cracks." This is the lesson of resilience. You do not need to be a hammer to break the walls of your ego. You just need to be like this sprout, gentle but relentless. Kalen touched the tip of one of the leaves with his finger, feeling the velvety texture and the cool moisture of the plant. He thought about his own struggles, his attempts to force his way to enlightenment, to smash through his obstacles with willpower. He had been trying to be the hammer striking against the stone of his conditioning, but the sprout showed him a different way. It didn't fight the stone, it simply grew around it, finding the path of least resistance and filling the empty space with life. It was a strategy of adaptation rather than confrontation. They stood there for a long time, contemplating the sprout as if it were a holy relic. The wind blew, ruffling the tiny leaves, but the plant held firm, rooted deep in the unseen soil beneath the stones. Kalen realized that his practice was like this sprout. It had started in the dark, in the cracks of his broken life, and had slowly pushed its way up toward the light. It was still small and vulnerable, easily crushed by a careless step, but it was alive. And because it was alive, it had the potential to grow into something vast. Master Hoshin gestured to the surrounding garden, where other shoots were beginning to appear, dotting the brown earth with specks of green. He said, "Do not despise the small beginnings. A giant pine tree begins as a seed smaller than your fingernail. Trust the intelligence of the seed. It knows how to become a tree without any instruction from you. Your job is just to provide the water and the sunlight. The growing happens by itself." This was the principle of natural unfolding, removing the burden of doing from Kalen's shoulders. Kalen felt a deep sense of relief. He didn't have to engineer his own awakening. He just had to tend the garden of his mind, pulling the weeds of distraction and watering the seeds of awareness. The rest was up to the mysterious biology of the spirit. He looked at the sprout one last time, committing its image to memory. It was a symbol of hope, a promise that even in the stoniest ground life could flourish if given a chance. He stood up, his knees cracking slightly, and walked on, but with a new lightness in his step. He found himself looking for other signs of life, other cracks where the green was breaking through. He saw moss growing on the north side of the tree's ferns, uncurling their fiddleheads in the shadows, and tiny wildflowers blooming in the shelter of the rocks. The world was teeming with quiet victories of softness over hardness. He felt part of this great uprising of life, no longer an isolated observer, but a participant in the spring. Later that day, he sat in meditation and visualized a green sprout growing in the center of his chest, pushing through the concrete of his anxiety. He breathed into it, feeding it with his attention. He felt a warmth spreading through his ribcage, a softening of the armor he had built around his heart. It was a subtle sensation, but it was real. The thaw was complete, and the growing season had begun. That night he dreamt he was a tree, his roots pushing deep into the earth, and his branches reaching for the stars. He woke up feeling grounded and expansive, his mind clear and open. The lesson of the sprout had taken root in his consciousness, planting a seed of patience that would continue to grow long after the spring had turned to summer. He understood that true strength was not about being unbreakable, but about being alive enough to grow through the breaks. Walking without arriving. The mountain paths were finally clear of snow, revealing the dark, rich earth beneath. Master Hoshin invited Kalen for a walk, not a purposeful hike to a destination, but a wandering stroll through the lower forests known as Kinhin, or walking meditation. They stepped out of the monastery gates, leaving the enclosed world of the temple behind, and entering the wilder, chaotic energy of the woods. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil, rotting leaves, and new growth, a complex perfume of decay and rebirth. Kalen fell into step behind the master, his habitual stride long and purposeful, aiming to get somewhere. Master Hoshin stopped immediately and turned around, holding up a hand. He said, "You are walking like a man who is late for a meeting. Here there is no meeting. There is no destination. We are not going to the waterfall or the peak. We are just walking. If you are thinking about the end of the walk, you are missing the walk itself. Place your attention in the soles of your feet. Feel the earth meeting you with every step." Kalen slowed down, shortening his stride to match the master's leisurely pace. He focused on the sensation of his feet inside his boots, the roll of the heel, the pressure on the ball of the foot, the push-off from the toes. It was difficult at first. His mind wanted to rush ahead to scout the trail, to anticipate the next turn. The urge to arrive was deeply ingrained, a symptom of a culture obsessed with goals and outcomes. Walking without a destination felt subversive, almost wrong, as if he were wasting time. But as they continued deeper into the forest, the rhythm of the slow walking began to work its magic. The frantic energy in his legs dissipated, replaced by a steady, grounding cadence. He began to notice the environment in a way he never had when he was rushing. He saw the intricate patterns of the bark on the cedar trees, the way the light dappled through the canopy, creating a mosaic of sun and shadow on the path. He heard the rustle of small animals in the undergrowth, the distant call of a cuckoo, the crunch of gravel under their boots. They came to a small wooden bridge crossing a rushing stream, swollen with meltwater. Master Hoshin stopped in the middle of the bridge and leaned over the railing, watching the water churn and foam below. Kalen joined him, mesmerized by the chaotic power of the river. The water was constantly moving, constantly changing, yet it was always the river. It was a perfect visual of flux, of the Heraclitean truth that you cannot step in the same river twice. They stood there for 10 minutes, saying nothing, just letting the sound of the water wash through their minds. Continuing on, the path wound upwards slightly, leading to a clearing filled with wild azaleas in full bloom. The color was shocking, a vibrant explosion of pink and purple against the green of the forest. Kalen felt a gasp of delight rise in his throat. If he had been rushing, he might have missed this entirely, or just glanced at it as he passed. But walking without arriving meant he was fully available to receive this gift of beauty. He stopped and smelled the flowers, inhaling the sweet, spicy fragrance that hung in the warm air. He realized that his entire life had been a race to some imaginary finish line. He had rushed through childhood to get to adulthood, rushed through school to get a job, rushed through work to get to the weekend. He had spent his life living in the not yet, always sacrificing the present for the future. But the future never arrived. When it did, it was just another now that he would rush through again. This walk was teaching him the antidote, to live in the already. He was already here. He had already arrived. Master Hoshin picked up a small pine cone from the path and turned it over in his hands, examining its symmetry. He handed it to Kalen as if it were a precious jewel. Kalen took it, feeling the rough texture and the sharp edges. It was a simple object, but in this state of heightened presence, it felt profound. It was a piece of the universe, complete and perfect in itself. He put it in his pocket, a talisman of the walk, a reminder to slow down. They looped back towards the monastery, the sun beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long golden rays through the trees. Kalen felt a strange sensation in his legs, not fatigue, but a kind of vibrant hum. He felt connected to the ground, as if roots were growing from his feet with every step. He wasn't just walking on the earth, he was walking with the earth. The separation between the walker and the path had blurred. As the monastery gates came into view, Kalen felt a pang of disappointment that the walk was ending. But then he corrected himself. The walk wasn't ending, it was just changing form. The walking would turn into sitting, the sitting into eating, the eating into sleeping. It was all one continuous movement of life. He stepped through the gates, not as a man returning from a trip, but as a man continuing a journey that had no beginning and no end. He had learned the secret of the Bodhisattva, to travel endlessly without ever leaving the present moment, the dissolution of time. Summer arrived at the silent peak with a heavy humidity that seemed to slow the very air itself, making every movement feel like wading through warm water. The cicadas began their relentless buzzing, a sonic wall of sound that vibrated in the teeth and bones, creating a backdrop of intensity to the stillness of the monastery. Kalen sat in the main hall, the large wooden doors thrown open to catch any hint of a breeze. He had been at the temple for nearly a year now, a full cycle of seasons, and his perception of time had undergone a radical transformation. The frantic ticking of the clock in his head had been replaced by the slow, rhythmic breathing of the mountain. He found himself losing track of the days of the week. Was it Tuesday or Friday? It no longer mattered. The artificial divisions of the calendar dissolved into a continuous flow of now. Morning was marked by the bell, noon by the sun, and evening by the shadows. This was the experience of timelessness, or akaliko, a quality of the Dharma that exists outside of temporal constraints. Kalen realized that his previous anxiety was entirely rooted in time, regret for the past or fear for the future. Without those two phantom dimensions, there was only the immediate sensation of the present, which was surprisingly peaceful. One afternoon, while weeding the vegetable garden under the hot sun, Kalen entered a state of flow so deep that he disappeared completely. He was pulling a stubborn weed, his hands deep in the warm soil, feeling the resistance of the roots and the sudden release as they gave way. In that moment, there was no Kalen pulling a weed, there was just the action of weeding. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. When the evening bell rang, he looked up startled, as if waking from a deep dream. He had been working for 4 hours, yet he felt no fatigue, only a vibrant clarity. He had touched the state of samadhi, or focused concentration, where time ceases to exist. Master Hoshin observed him from the veranda, fanning himself slowly with a paper fan. The master saw the change in Kalen's demeanor, the way his movements had smoothed out, losing their jerky, hurried quality. Kalen walked over, wiping the dirt from his hands, and bowed. He said, "Master, today I lost the afternoon. I don't know where it went." Master Hoshin smiled and replied, "You did not lose it, you found it. When you forget time, you remember yourself. The clock is a cage for the mind. Today you stepped through the bars." They sat together watching the sunset, the sky turning a bruised purple and orange. Kalen watched the light change moment by moment, a seamless transition that could not be divided into discrete segments. He tried to pinpoint the exact moment when day became night, but it was impossible. It was a continuous flux, a river of light flowing into darkness. He understood then that time was just a concept, a mental grid overlaying the fluid reality of change. The universe didn't have a watch, it just moved. The concept of patience, which had been his primary struggle, was now revealing its true nature. Patience was not about waiting for something to happen in the future. It was about being completely satisfied with what was happening right now. If you are fully here, you are never waiting, because you are never wanting to be elsewhere. The tension of waiting dissolves when the desire for the next moment evaporates. Kalen felt a profound relaxation in his gut, a release of the chronic holding pattern he had lived in for decades. He remembered his arrival at the gate, the frantic knocking, the desperate need to get inside. It felt like a memory from another lifetime belonging to a stranger. That Kalen had been running from a ghost chasing a shadow. The Kalen sitting here now was content to just sit to watch the fireflies beginning to blink in the tall grass. He realized that the destination he had been seeking was not a place or a state of mind, but this very capacity to stop running. The cicadas slowly quieted down, replaced by the chirping of crickets, a cooler, thinner sound that signaled the cooling of the earth. The transition was effortless, orchestrated by an intelligence far vast than the human intellect. Kalen felt a sense of trust in this intelligence. He didn't need to manage his life, he just needed to align with the rhythm. He was a note in the song, not the composer. This surrender was the ultimate act of faith, not in a deity, but in the Dharma, or the law of nature. He walked back to his room, through the dark corridors, navigating by memory and touch. The wooden floor felt cool and smooth under his bare feet. He didn't turn on the lamp immediately, preferring to sit in the dark and listen to the night. The silence was no longer empty, it was pregnant with potential. He felt the presence of the other monks sleeping in their rooms, the presence of the trees outside, the presence of the stars above. He was alone, but he was not separate. The illusion of isolation had been shattered by the dissolution of time. He lay down on his futon, feeling the support of the floor. He didn't worry about waking up early or about the tasks of tomorrow. Tomorrow was just an idea. There was only this breath, and then this breath. He fell asleep instantly, slipping into the stream of unconsciousness with the ease of a leaf falling onto a river. He was resting in the eternal now, the reflection in the pond. The heat of summer began to break, giving way to the crisp clarity of early autumn. The air grew thinner and sharper, enhancing the visual resolution of the world. Kalen stood by the same pond where he had watched the ice melt months ago. The water was now clear and dark, free of algae and debris, reflecting the sky with mirror-like perfection. He looked down into the water, expecting to see his own face, but what he saw surprised him. He saw a face that was familiar, yet different. The lines of tension around the eyes had softened, the jaw was unclenched, and the eyes held a depth of stillness that had not been there before. He realized he was looking at a stranger, or perhaps he was looking at himself for the first time, without the distortion of his neuroses. The frantic seeker, the anxious achiever, the impatient traveler, they were gone, leaving behind a simpler, more elemental version of himself. He leaned closer, examining the reflection. It was just a face, a collection of features, but it was no longer a mask. It was transparent, revealing the quietude that now lived inside him. This was the face of someone who had stopped fighting himself. Master Hoshin joined him, tossing a small pebble into the center of the pond. Plop. Ripples spread out in perfect concentric circles, distorting the reflection, shattering the image into 1,000 fragments. Kalen watched his face dissolve into abstract shapes, dancing and shimmering in the light. He didn't feel a sense of loss, only a fascination with the play of form and emptiness. The master said, "Your self is like this reflection. It appears, it disappears, it changes with every ripple. Do not cling to the image. Be the water, not the reflection." Kalen understood. He had spent his life trying to polish his image to create a solid, permanent self that he could present to the world. He had tried to freeze the water to keep the reflection stable, but now he saw that the self was fluid, dynamic, and empty of inherent existence, the truth of anatta. He was a process, not a product. The freedom lay in allowing the ripples to happen, in not taking the distortion personally. They walked around the pond, watching the water slowly settle back into stillness. The reflection returned, reassembling itself from the chaos. It was a lesson in resilience. The mind gets disturbed, the emotions get stirred up. But if you don't interfere, if you don't add more pebbles, the water naturally returns to clarity. This was the nature of the Buddha mind. It is self-correcting, self-healing, if only we get out of the way. Kalen looked at the master and saw him not as a guru on a pedestal, but as a fellow human being, a mirror reflecting his own potential. He felt a wave of gratitude that was not subservient but brotherly. He said, "Master, I used to think you were hiding the secrets from me. Now I see you were showing them to me all along. You were just waiting for me to open my eyes." Master Hoshin laughed, a genuine hearty sound that startled a nearby frog. He said, "I have no secrets. The birds shout the truth, the wind sings it. I just pointed my finger." They sat on a stone bench overlooking the valley below. The mist was rising from the river, creating a sea of clouds that obscured the world of men. Kalen felt a sense of detachment, not cold or uncaring, but a healthy distance from the drama of samsara. He could go back down there eventually, but he would not be consumed by it. He carried the mountain inside him now, a portable sanctuary of peace. He picked up a fallen maple leaf, which was just beginning to turn red at the edges. The seasons were turning again, the wheel of life spinning endlessly. He felt no sadness at the passing of summer, no anxiety about the coming winter. He was in sync with the cycle. He accepted the impermanence of all things, including his own life. This acceptance was the key to the cage of fear. If everything changes, then there is nothing to hold on to, and if there is nothing to hold on to, there is nothing to lose. He dropped the leaf into the pond, watching it float on the surface, a boat of crimson sailing on a dark sea. It drifted slowly, carried by the invisible currents. Kalen breathed in the cool air, filling his lungs with the chi of the mountain. He felt strong, clear, and ready. Ready for what? It didn't matter. Just ready. As the sun set, the first star appeared, the evening star, bright and lonely in the twilight. Kalen bowed to the star, bowed to the pond, bowed to the master. It was a bow of completion. The circle was closing. He had come to the mountain to find something, and he had found that he already had it. The treasure was sewn into the lining of his own robe. He smiled a small secret smile and turned to walk back to the temple, his shadow long and thin on the gravel path. The power of patience revealed. The day of Kalen's departure arrived with the turning of the leaves, which had transformed the mountain slopes into a burning tapestry of crimson and gold. He stood in the courtyard with his bag packed at his feet, the same bag that had felt so heavy upon his arrival, but now seemed remarkably light. It was not that the contents had changed, but that the carrier had changed. The burden of his expectations, his anxieties, and his frantic need for control had been left behind, buried in the compost of the monastery garden. He looked around the familiar space, at the raked gravel, at the weathered wood of the gates, at the silent stones he had spent so many hours contemplating. Every corner of this place held a memory of his struggle and his slow awakening. Master Hoshin emerged from the main hall, carrying a small, wrapped parcel. He walked with the same fluid grace that had so intimidated Kalen in the beginning, but now Kalen saw only the beauty of efficient movement. The master stopped in front of him and bowed deeply, a gesture of respect between equals. He handed the parcel to Kalen. It was wrapped in simple indigo cloth tied with a precise knot. Kalen accepted it with both hands, feeling the texture of the fabric and the weight of the object inside. He did not rush to open it. He knew that the gift was not just the object, but the moment of exchange itself. Master Hoshin spoke, his voice quiet but resonant in the crisp morning air. He said, "You came here seeking a sword to cut through your problems. Instead, you found a seed. You learned that you cannot force the flower to bloom by pulling on the petals. You learned that the strongest force in the universe is not the hammer, but the water. Patience is not passivity. Patience is the active engagement with the rhythm of reality. It is the power to wait for the mud to settle so the water can become clear. This is the true power you take with you." Kalen untied the knot, slowly savoring the anticipation. Inside, the cloth lay a simple, smooth stone, from the riverbed polished to a dull shine. It was ordinary in every way, yet it was perfect. It was solid, cool, and grounded. It was a reminder of the lesson of the stone. To simply be, to endure without complaint, to let the weather pass over you while remaining centered. Kalen closed his hand over the stone, feeling its reassuring presence against his palm. It was an anchor, a piece of the mountain he could carry in his pocket back into the chaotic world below. He looked at the master and said, "I thought I was wasting my time. I thought nothing was happening." But everything was happening. The master nodded and replied, "The grass grows by itself, but only when the conditions are right. You created the conditions. You stayed. You sat. You swept. That is all. There is no secret magic. There is only the magic of persistence. Go now and be a mountain in the marketplace. Be a pool of stillness in the city." Kalen hoisted his bag onto his shoulders. The weight settled comfortably on his back, a familiar sensation, but without the accompanying tension. He walked toward the great wooden gates which stood open, framing the view of the valley below. The mist was clearing, revealing the winding path he had climbed a year ago. It looked different now. It wasn't a steep obstacle to be conquered, but a beautiful ribbon connecting the sky to the earth. He felt a pang of sadness at leaving this sanctuary, but he knew that the monastery was no longer just a place. It was a state of mind he carried within him. He stepped across the threshold, pausing one last time to look back. Master Hoshin was standing in the center of the courtyard, bowing. Kalen bowed back, holding the posture for a long moment, expressing his profound gratitude without words. Then he turned and began the descent. His steps were slow and deliberate, matching the rhythm of his breath. He was not rushing to get down. He was walking the path, enjoying the crunch of the gravel, the smell of the pine needles, the touch of the wind on his face. As he descended, he encountered a young man hiking up the trail, red-faced and panting, his eyes fixed on the summit with a look of desperate determination. The young man looked at Kalen and asked breathlessly, "How much further is it? Is it worth it?" Kalen smiled, seeing his former self in the stranger's frantic energy. He stopped and said gently, "It is exactly as far as it needs to be. Just watch your step. The destination will take care of itself." The young man looked confused but nodded, rushing past him up the hill. Kalen continued down, carrying the silence of the peak into the noise of the world. He heard the distant hum of the highway, the faint sounds of civilization rising to meet him. He did not recoil. He felt the stone in his pocket and breathed deeply. He was ready. He had learned the art of waiting, the power of the pause. He knew that no matter how fast the world spun, he could always return to the center. He could always watch the ice melt. He could always listen to the wind. The journey was not over. In fact, it was just beginning. The real practice was not sitting in a quiet room, but maintaining that quietude in the middle of a traffic jam. Kalen walked on a small smile playing on his lips, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who knows that he has all the time in the world, because he is living in the eternal present. He was the sprout that had broken through the stone. He was the river that had found the sea. Conclusion and deep rest. And so we leave Kalen on his path, descending from the clouds, but carrying the sky within his heart. His journey from the frantic heat of impatience to the cool clarity of patience is a mirror for all of us who struggle with the pace of modern life. We are all climbing that mountain, burdened by our baggage, looking for a quick fix for our suffering. But as the story has shown, the only way out is through. The only way to find peace is to stop running toward it and simply stop, to sit, to breathe, to wait. The power of patience is not about enduring suffering with grit. It is about aligning yourself with the natural unfolding of things. It is trusting that the winter will turn to spring, that the ice will melt, that the seed will grow. It is the deep knowing that you are exactly where you need to be, and that everything is happening in its own perfect time. When you let go of the timeline, you let go of the tension. You enter the flow of the Dharma, where effort becomes effortless and life becomes a dance rather than a race. As you lie here now, listening to the fading echo of these words, allow yourself to embody the lessons of the silent peak. Visualize the stone in your own hand, feeling its solidity and its calm. Feel the roots of your being extending deep into the earth, grounding you in this present moment. You have nowhere to go. You have nothing to do. You have arrived. The mountain is inside you. The silence is yours. Let your breathing become like the slow melting of the ice, natural, unforced, and fluid. Let every exhalation carry away the dust of your day, the debris of your worries, the tension of your waiting. Sweep the courtyard of your mind until it is empty and clean, ready to receive the rest that you deserve. You have worked hard. You have traveled far. Now it is time to put down the heavy bag. It is time to rest by the fire. Notice the silence in the room around you. It is not an empty silence. It is a full silence, rich with potential and peace. Listen to it. Let it wrap around you like a warm blanket, protecting you from the noise of the world. You are safe here. You are held by the gravity of the earth and the vastness of the sky. There is no need to rush into sleep. Let sleep come to you like a shy bird landing on a branch. Be patient. Be still. Remember the sprout growing through the crack. Even in the hardest times, there is a life force within you that is resilient and strong. Trust that force. It knows how to heal you. It knows how to restore you. You don't need to manage your sleep. You just need to create the conditions for it. Soften your body. Quiet your mind. Open your heart. The rest will happen by itself. As we reach the end of this journey, I invite you to make a small commitment to your own peace. If this story has touched you, if you have felt the quiet power of the mountain, please consider subscribing to this channel. By doing so, You are planting a seed of intention, ensuring that you can always return to this sanctuary whenever you need to remember the power of patience. It is a small act, but as we know, small acts can lead to great changes. Now let the images of the story fade. The mist, the pine trees, the stone garden, the melting pond. Let them dissolve into the darkness behind your closed eyes. You are drifting now, floating on the river of the night, moving toward the ocean of deep sleep. Everything is slowing down. The world is turning away. The stars are watching over you. May you sleep with the heaviness of a stone and the lightness of a cloud. May your dreams be clear and your rest be deep. You have learned the lesson. You have found the path. The mountain is always there waiting for you. Good night. Sleep well. Be at peace.